The market's crashing. Where in the world should you put your money?
It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Brian, I am excited to talk about this because this is a question that's on a lot of people's minds. Right now, it seems like the sky is falling. It seems like things are going bad. So the natural question is, what should I do now? What should I change? How should I shift? What, money guys, is the answer?
Well, it is one of those things that's unique in 2022 and the fact that there's nowhere to hide. I mean, in the fact that not only is the stock market getting beaten up, because interest rates are shooting up like a rocket, bonds have even been beaten up. It's unique, and I can completely understand people probably are having that gut react feeling, you know, that fight or flight feeling of should I do something to react to this market right now? We wanted to answer, hey, where should your next dollar go?
But before we do that, before we actually weigh in on that, a little perspective perhaps is helpful. If we think about trading days in the market over the last 70 years, just thinking about as measured by the S&P 500, 46% of individual trading days have been negative. So that's almost half the time. So some days the market's up and some days the market's down. And if you look over the last 70 years, the S&P 500 has dropped by 20%, has gone into bear market territory 11 different times over that period. So right now you're saying, oh man, I just don't know. The market, half the time it's going down, and then the other parts of the time it can lose a lot of money. It is frightening. What should I do? Well,
there's several things, just off the cuff feedback. When I saw that stat of 46%, I was like, man, that's almost a coin flip. But then how does that compete with, because then I started thinking about something we share on the show all the time. In a decade, meaning 10 years, pretty much 80% of the time, markets are good. So if day by day it's a coin flip, but I know on a decade, if you look at it from a year standpoint, 8 out of 10 is pretty good. And then I hear the stat that we've only had 20% downturns. Was it 7 times?
11 times.
11 times. 7-11. I guess that's where I was getting it. But 11 times, it starts to show me there's something that's leading me to believe that time has some component in this analysis.
So let's talk about that a little bit. We wanted to share a few quick illustrations with you. The first is one that we have developed here internally. If you look at just a 60-40 portfolio, and when we say 60-40, that's 60% stock, 40% bond portfolio, from 1953 all the way till the end of 2021, and you look at individual year performance, it seems sort of haphazard. There's no rhyme or reason. There's no pattern. It looks a little sporadic, but on average, we know that the average return over that time period is an average return of 9.8%.
I think it's wild because I see the green line there, the 9.81%. And this is 53 to 2021. But you're right, Bo. Just looking at the visual, for those who are listening to this on the podcast, it looks all over the place. Each year is a dot, essentially, on annual performance, and it looks like no rhyme or reason on this scatter plot.
However, if we don't just look at it in isolation, if we don't look at it on a year-by-year basis, but we stretch out our timeline and we say, okay, let's look at returns on 10-year rolling periods, exact same years, exact same portfolio, exact same time period, what you can see now is when you stretch out your time frame, there looks to be a lot more order to it. It looks to be a lot more reasoned. It almost looks like it's cyclical. And now everything kind of compresses towards that average. That 9% annualized decade performance on here is pretty close. And you see, there aren't any decades on here where a 60-40 would have lost money. So that's interesting. When we think about the market, we have to prevent ourselves from focusing on the 46% of days that are down and think more in terms of the long term.
Well, I find it interesting looking at the visual of this, but also making sure I'm doing a good job of describing it for all those who are listening on the podcast. You've already nailed the fact that there's not a single one of these decades that's zero, because this is a diversified portfolio. Right. It's not just 100. We've heard of the lost decade, but that was 100% equity portfolio. And I also find it amazing the ebb and flow of getting close to the average, meaning that it gets close and then it goes apart, gets close. I mean, it really does look almost like a sound wave that's everything, that's got a magnet that attaches it to that average return. This is pretty powerful stuff. So that's very important. Missing the mark, time is incredibly important in this illustration.
Let's talk about, we said that, there's been 11 different time periods where the market has lost 20%. What about those? How do we think about those in perspective? Or there's a great illustration we hear that we want to show here that just compares from 1942 all the way through this year, bear markets versus bull markets. And there's really two things that we're looking at here. For each of the bull markets, how long did they last in terms of months or years? And for the bear markets, how long did they last? And then how severe were they? If it was a bear market, how big was the loss? And if it was a bull market, how impressive was the gain? And what you can see is when you compare these two, even though there were 11 of these periods where the market dropped more than 20%, the bull markets far outpace and are so much grander than the bear markets that exist in our economic cycle.
Yeah, this is what shows. Whenever I look at this bear markets versus the bull markets, it shows why it's good to be an investor, because visually there is so much more money made than what is lost in those short downturns. Pretty amazing stuff if you just look at this visual. I appreciate First Trust is always so consistent with updating this and providing a really good illustration on why you should stay on path, not get into the timing.
And so then we think about, okay, well, I get that, guys. I get that the market's good, but right now the market feels pretty bad. Right now, the market is in bear market territory. How should I think about this? Well, none of us know when the end of the bear market is going to happen and when the start of the bull market is going to begin. But here's what we do know. If we look at all of these bear markets since 1950, on average, the average loss has been about 35%, and the average duration of the bear market has been 14 months. I would not get caught on that because we don't know where it's actually going to happen. This is what I think is interesting. When you think about the recovery and how markets behave, in the first month after the bottom of a bear market, on average, the market has made back almost 15%. In the first year, the market makes back over 43%. And in the first 2 years after the bear market, the market makes back almost 63% on average.
I think it's interesting. When I look at this slide, I always think, man, there's some traps, some logic traps that people will fall into. They know here we are in 2022, and it's October. We know that this bear market, where the market's down right now, 25% from where we started the year, we're about 10 months into this. Well, a logic trap would be you look at this and be like, well, this is easy. I'm just going to sit on the sidelines for the next three and a half months.
Yep.
And then, or pay attention, we're already down 25%. Maybe I'll just wait for us to be down 35%, and that's when I'll jump in. Here's the reality of the situation. And Bo kind of gave the answer first, but I still want to kind of walk you through falling into these logic traps. We don't really know how long this bear market will last. And yes, we're only down 25% right now compared to the average of 35%. But these things typically, the momentum that builds into that 10% could happen in a week. It could happen in 2 weeks. It could happen just in a matter of days, because it's not uncommon that when you hit capitulation, it's going to pile on very quickly. But then guess what? It happens. That recovery, just as Bo shared, is so quick. So if you tried to wait until we could get to 13 months or we got to 35%, whatever your trigger point is, you're going to miss it. Because as you can see, the first month after we hit the dead bottom, close to 15%. But Bo, you've made this point before. Then the next 3 months is 21%. Isn't it amazing that 2/3 of that 3-month performance was made in the first month?
Very first month.
And then you extrapolate that out 12 months. The average rate of return of recovery is about 44%. But a lot of that, close to half of that, is loaded up in the first 3 months.
That's exactly right.
And then you can see how this builds. It turns very quickly. be very careful about trying to time the market.
And you might be saying, okay, guys, I get that. But does this really matter? How big of a deal is this? Well, we want to show it to you a slightly different way. Let's say that you look at the time period from 1980 all the way through 2021. So over 40 years of market performance. And let's say if you started with $10,000 invested in 1980, what would that turn into? Well, if you just left it invested over that 40-year period, that $10,000 could turn into over $1 million.
That's amazing.
Almost $1.1 million. If all you did is you got cute and you just missed the 5 best trading days, out of all 41 years, you only missed 5 days of activity, your total portfolio drops down to only $676,000. If you were to miss the 10 best days, it drops to $487,000. If you were to miss the 30 best days, so that's really just 1 month out of a 41-year period, your $10,000 only turns into $176,000. If you were to miss the 50 best days in that 41-year period, your $10,000 only turns into about $78,000. When it turns, it tends to turn aggressively, and the only way you get to take advantage of that is if you are actually in the market when it happens.
I find it interesting because I've seen trolls in the past when they see this stat and this chart come up, they say, yeah, but if you did it the other saying, you instead of missing the best days, what if you could avoid the worst days? But unless you got that sports almanac
That's
from
right,
Biff,
unless Biff showed up for you.
It doesn't work that way. You can't time. Nobody has the understanding of when bad things are going to happen. But what you can control is, hey, look, we're in an ever-changing economy where it's growing through innovation. It's just human nature. We want to make things better. We want to innovate. We want to grow. The economy overall is in expansion over the long term. You can control staying the course and staying invested all days. Remember to always be buying.
Okay, so what can we conclude from this? What are some of the takeaways? We think there's 4 that are pretty high level when we look at these illustrations. Number 1, the market is unpredictable in the short term. So if you're trying to figure out what it's going to do in the near term, it's a futile exercise. You're probably not going to have a lot of success in that. Number 2 is that good markets tend to last much longer than bad markets. So don't let the fear of the bad keep you from experiencing the excitement and the goodness of the good. The third thing is that when the market changes direction, it tends to do so quickly and without warning. If we all knew when the market would turn, we'd all be incredibly rich. Unfortunately, we don't know that. And then fourth, trying to time the market can be extremely costly over time. If you just miss the quick turn, the rapid V-shaped recovery, it may be very hard to overcome missing that time in the market.
This is the money guy difference. I think most content creators would create this slide, give you these 4 known quantities of investing, but not give you the details.
That's right.
We actually, every one of the 4 charts that we just covered explain the why and the nuts and bolts of why this is going on. And what I love is like there's even unsaid things that you just need to understand about investing and staying the course. Number 1, the market's unpredictable in the short term. As we showed you, long term, you really can start setting and making assumptions because it gets much more consistent if you can just stay the course and not get sidetracked by your emotions. Good markets tend to last much longer than bad markets. Once again, telling you stay the course. Don't let yourself get sidetracked with this. And then remember, when they change, when we have V-shaped recoveries, yes, markets can be down for extended periods of time. And we can see even there's some false recoveries. But the reality is when it truly hits the bottom, that recovery is going to have a lot of momentum. Really powerful stuff.
All right, so you're thinking, okay, guys, I get this. I understand the charts and I get the academic approach, but where should I put my money? Well, in order for us to be able to answer the question where, we need to understand what are you really asking? Are you asking where is the best place to deploy my capital given my current situation? Or are you saying, hey, once I know where to put it, what should I put it in? Where should I invest my dollars? Don't worry, we're going to answer both of those questions.
Well, I've already shared one logic trap. We always, as humans, we're trying to find some type of pattern or way we can do things. And I think a lot of people, we're living in these times, you'll even watch our content and be like, ooh, this is the time to go roll out there and get as much risk as I can, because I can't buy low unless the market's getting beaten up. And those guys, I just watched that content. Market's down right now. Let's jump in. No, look, you've got to have context to know exactly where you are in your own personal financial journey. And everyone is different. Just like we all have different fingerprints, just like snowflakes are different, your financial journey is going to be different from even your classmates. It's going to be different from your peers down the street. We're all on our own journey. You've got to take personal inventory of where am I in that process.
So if you've been a fan of the show for any amount of time, or if you've been paying attention to our content, you probably know where we're going with our first point. When you ask the question, where should I put my money? We have a tried and true process that we've made available to you. We actually have a deliverable that you can go download for free at moneyguide.com/resources that actually walks you through, where do I put my next dollar? What is the instruction manual for what I should be doing? So if you find yourself in the position right now thinking, okay, the market's crashing, I've got money coming in, I've got income, where should I put my money? This should be your first stop to answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, this thing is I like the word proven, because we've not only used this for ourselves, we've used it with clients. It's been road tested with tons of Q&As and people trying to poke holes in it. This stuff works, but I think it helps you to understand we got to get the basics covered, and we're about to cover where that falls. And then there's beyond the basics on actually how you build wealth. So we need to focus and kind of dive a little deeper in what does it mean to build the basics of your financial life.
And so, in the terms of where to put my money, if you're thinking about the financial order of operations, step one is just to have your deductibles covered. That's your health insurance deductible, your home insurance deductible, your auto deductible. These are the things that if you got yourself into a tight situation, this is your first line of defense on cash reserves. This is not your full cash reserve. This is the first step. This is a non-negotiable that you must have in place right out of the gate.
Yeah, this is just the bare bones emergency fund, just to make sure that something catastrophic or bad happens to you, that you're just not immediately ditched. I mean, this is why your insurance deductibles is going to be the first part to make sure you can handle whatever comes your way financially.
The second step of the financial order of operations is your employer match. So if you're thinking, where should I put my money? And you're not immediately going out and getting all of your employer match, you are leaving money on the table. It doesn't matter what the stock market is doing, because if you have an employer that will match you dollar for dollar on money that you put in, that's a 100% rate of return. Do you realize how much the market could lose and you will still be ahead just by going out and getting that free money?
Well, we always share. $1 has the potential for a 20-year-old by retirement to become $88. So every decision you make is important. This is twice the goodness. So every dollar put into an employer plan with a dollar for dollar match is that dollar for a 20-year-old has the potential of turning into $176. Yep. I'm talking about, man, you want to build wealth. And if you're doing Roth options, you really have the potential to build some tremendous opportunity for yourself in the long term.
Step 3 of the financial order of operations is high interest debt. Most often this shows up in the form of credit cards. When you're paying off credit card debt, you can think about the interest rate that you're paying on that is like it's delivering you a rate of return equal to that interest rate. So if you have credit card debt, that's no-go land. So right now, it should not matter what's going on in the market. If you have credit card debt, you should be doing everything in your power to get out of it. Don't let compounding interest be the thing that works against you.
Well, think about it. We show you the most aggressive we have on rates of returns is for 20-year-olds. You could consider something like 10% because you're swinging for the fences. 10%. Realize credit card companies, they're getting almost twice that on what they charge you on these things. So that is so punitive. Do not turn the whole power of compounding growth against you. Avoid credit card debt. Look, credit card use, disciplined credit card use can be okay. But credit card debt, as Bo has already shared, no-go land, so just don't fall into that trap.
And then as we move into step 4 of the financial order of operations, that is your emergency reserve. Again, you should not be worried about what's going on in the market performance, any of that stuff if you don't have an appropriate emergency reserves in place. You need to have 3 to 6 months of your living expenses in liquid cash to keep you out of the ditch should a financial emergency arise.
Well, this stuff is so important because unfortunately when we have market downturns, we also have a lot of volatility in real estate values, on the job market, where it's not uncommon. This is where unemployment starts spiking because companies are making hard decisions, and I don't want you to get caught without that emergency reserves. That's what the 3 to 6 months. It's not only, step 1 was deductibles covered because that's just to keep your life out of the ditch. Emergency reserves with step 4 is to make sure no matter what comes your way, including losing your ability to have income, is going to be protected for a few months. That's good.
All right, so we've talked about steps 1 through 4, and you may have noticed the market did not affect these steps. The market did not have an impact on. These are kind of like the baseline that if you're in steps 1 through 4, you shouldn't worry about what's going on in the market. You should focus on making sure that you knock out each of these 4 steps. Now we get to move over into what we call the exciting stuff, the wealth building stuff, starting with step 5, Roth and HSA.
Yeah, this is when people say, hey, okay, I got the basics covered. I got the emergency stuff taken care of. But now, what should I do? What's the maximum opportunity? And for young people, guys, we love tax-free growth. That's what step 5 really is. We talk about Roth, we talk about HSAs, because both of these have tremendous opportunity to grow without the government taking any portion of it. So, and by the way, HSAs, they actually get a little bit of sweetener on top of that, and the fact that they're deductible even on the contribution, that is tremendously powerful. Do not miss out on what this money can do for you.
And if you don't believe us that Roth is a pretty valuable asset, a pretty valuable thing to have in your financial tool belt, it's so good that the government actually limits not only who can put money into those, that once you make over a certain income limit, the government won't even let you fund Roth IRAs anymore. They put limitations on how much you can put into Roth. With IRAs, it's only $6,000. Even if you're doing a Roth 401k, you can only put in $20,500. Or if you're doing an HSA for a family, you can only put in a little over $7,000. So even getting dollars into this bucket is limited because the government recognizes how valuable tax-free dollars can be in your total wealth building journey.
Now, a lot of people watching this, Bo, might have already been in the workforce for a while, have traditional dollars, they have a rollover IRA because they've changed jobs. Why do downturns in the economy, specifically the markets, as I've already shared, we're in full bear market status now, over 25% down. Those create a contrarian opportunity that we want to do a case study on. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, if you're someone who's perhaps thinking, I've got these pre-tax IRA assets and I want to convert them to Roth. I've heard that I can do that. Downturns may be a wonderful opportunity, and we'll show you why. Let's look at a case study. Let's assume that you have 2 individuals, Freddie and Teddy, and they each have $100,000 in a pre-tax IRA on January 1st. By June 30th, the market drops by 20%. Does that sound familiar? We've seen that story before. Well, Freddie decides that he's going to convert $20,000 to Roth. So on June 30th, he converts $20,000. So what he's left with is $60,000 in his pre-tax IRA, and he's got $20,000 in his Roth IRA. Well, then let's assume that the market recovers. It goes back up 25% for the rest of the year, and it finishes December 31st back where it started. Teddy now decides he's going to convert $20,000 to his Roth at the end of the year. So what you actually have is Freddie, who converted while the market was down, at the end of the year has $75,000 in pre-tax assets and $25,000 in Roth assets. Teddy, on the other hand, who waited until the market recovered, who waited until the end of the year, has $80,000 in pre-tax assets and only $20,000 in Roth assets. What you can see is that they both converted $20,000. They both did the same transaction and they both owe the same amount of taxes. They both also have a $100,000 portfolio, but what's different is because Freddie took advantage of the market being depressed when he converted those dollars, he actually has $5,000 more on the Roth side of the equation than Teddy does. And that $5,000 over the long term will grow tax-free and kind of a huge impact on his total portfolio.
What I love about this is that this just illustrated the unique benefit of that V-shaped recovery. I mean, you think about it. We're down right now. This is 5,000 on 100,000, 5% difference. Doesn't seem like much. But if you think about what this means, remember I shared with you, a 20-year-old $1 has the potential to become $88. A 30-year-old $1 still has the potential to become $23. Right. This could be that $5,000, especially for like a 30-year-old. That could be a factor of, I mean, you think about doing the math, that could be a six-figure difference just doing that one conversion. The dollars, the incremental dollar cost was nothing. It was a matter of when and where the timing occurred on this, created a six-figure tax-free difference. That's powerful. I want you to, this is the edge, because you think about these little decisions that you're like, oh, that's not that big of a deal, have tremendous long-term impacts to your future self. So maximize all of your financial opportunities.
So if you are someone working on your tax-free bucket and we are in a downturn, this may be a strategy for you to consider. But maybe that's not where you are in the financial order. Maybe you've already maxed out those. Well, then we move on to step 6, max out your employer-sponsored retirement options.
Yeah, this is one where I think you have to kind of play a little bit of put your CPA hat on and think about where you think taxes are going. We know governments have a lot of debt and they have a lot of need. So we're going to probably have to raise taxes over the long term. And then there's also this trend that when you're in your peak earning years of your 40s and 50s and then you retire, all of a sudden when you don't have that earned income, there's potential that your tax rates are going to drop significantly in retirement because now you no longer have all that high earned income that's being taxed at the highest marginal tax rate. So if you take those two things in understanding is that tax rates are probably going up over time, but there is potential that down the road when I retire, that tax rates will be lower because I have less earned income on my income tax return. That would encourage you, hey, maybe while I'm in these peak earning years, I ought to go ahead and try to either, make a determination, should I be doing Roth, meaning tax-free growth now, or should I be waiting until I retire and do a Roth conversion later? Or maybe I'm in that super high tax rate situation right now. Maybe it'd be better if I took the tax deduction now so that I then could convert later. There's all kind of cool planning opportunities. So much so, Bo, that we put some numbers to this so people could kind of analyze, taking into account their federal and their state taxes and figure out, should I be doing Roth or should I be doing, traditional so I get that tax deduction now?
Yeah, if you are someone who wants to figure out sort of a rule of thumb for where you are, we say that if you look at your federal marginal tax rate, the tax rate you'll pay on your next dollar, plus your state marginal tax rate, and you add those two together and you're 30% or higher, there's a really good chance that pre-tax makes the most sense for you right now, meaning that the tax benefit today available to you is so valuable, you might not want to walk away from it. But if, however, you add up your federal marginal tax rate and your state tax rate and it's less than 25%, then you're in a low enough tax bracket that maybe you should consider doing Roth contributions to your employer-sponsored retirement account, because odds are you're not going to be walking away from a big tax benefit now, and you're going to be able to let those dollars grow tax-free and pull them out tax-free in retirement. That's a really good rule of thumb to use to decide when you should go pre-tax and when you should go Roth.
And I think it's important when we use terminology like max out retirement. Now, a lot of people are thinking, hey, I know right now the funding thresholds are what,
20,500.
500. Okay, so is that the number? Not necessarily. I want people to know you can graduate from step 6 of the financial order of operations without reaching the full government limit on 401ks or 403bs if it's 25% of your gross income. That's the thing, because I want people to be encouraged. You can graduate from step 6 if you're on an income less than $100,000 or $80,000, whatever the number is. you'll quickly realize, yes, it's okay. You can graduate to step 7, and we'll talk about that, even if your income is lower without hitting that government maximum.
Yeah, step 7, what you're alluding to is the hyper accumulation phase. This is the time when you start saving 25% of your gross income. This is often the time when folks start their third tax bucket. They've done the tax-free stuff with the Roths and HSAs. They've done the tax-deferred stuff with their employer-sponsored retirement accounts. Now they're working on that third bucket. They're working on the after-tax bucket. And for most of us, when there are downturns, when there are times like what's going on in the market right now, we've already got the 401ks and the 403bs on autopilot. We've already got the Roths and the HSAs on autopilot. This, for most people, is where you can actually thinking about putting dollars when we see volatility, when we see bear markets, when we see the market providing us an opportunity.
Well, I don't want people to get distracted, because it's easy to say, even if you reach 25% savings and investing as a part of your gross income, when we hit market volatility like right now, you could start questioning, hey, especially if you're in your first 10 years of investing, because in that first 10 years, maybe you haven't had enough time for the compounding to really look much different than what most of the money in the account is actually what you put in. Or even worse, what if you started investing in the last 3 years? It's not uncommon in a bear market like we're in right now. You're actually losing money, meaning what you put in could be more than what the actual fair market value of the account. So you're like, I'm getting the heck out of this thing, and that's the worst thing you can do. And we wanted to show, because we actually had a comment come through where this person said, you guys are always assuming things are growing, that we're on this expanding economy. And what if we get into a period like the Great Depression, where, from 1929 to the 50s, the market made absolutely nothing? You guys would be in trouble. And I'm always like, no, this person played right into our hands, that if you just have the strategy of always be buying, hold your nose, I don't care what's going on with the economy, always be buying. There's even opportunity to being automatic in your behavior, being consistent in your behavior, even in the world's worst times. Yeah,
if you look at the Great Depression, we've shown this slide before. Maybe you guys have seen this. In September of 1929, it closed at $381. And then you fast forward 25 years. In November of 1954, it closed at $383, a $2 increase over a 25-year time period. If you would have just bought at the beginning and waited till the end, then yeah, that's perhaps what your portfolio looked like. However, if you could have been a contrarian, if you could have been someone who, like Brian said, held your nose and drove through it, and you said, I'm going to invest $10,000 every year through the Great Depression, at the end of the 25-year period, you would have annualized almost a 12% rate of return. The $260,000 you would have invested could have turned into $1.5 million, even in the worst market that we've seen in the history of our stock market.
Well, I think it goes, because this is a great illustration on why you should stay the course and be consistent, even in periods that feels like it's negative. But I think a lot of times we could go one step further, Bo, and show that what you might perceive as the worst opportunity might be the best opportunity. Right. And there's always that saying. We did a TikTok react where somebody said, investing is easy, as all I have to do is buy when the market's down and then sell when the market's high. So it's that buy low, sell high. I'm like, man, that sounds so easy to just say it in a TikTok video, that you can quit your day job and just do it. But as we're experiencing right now, because when he made that video, we weren't in a bear market. It seemed like it was a no lose. You just buy here, you wait 3 or 4 months, and it's like, grass growing in the summer. It doesn't matter what's going on. It's just growing like weeds. But that's not the way it always works. And we wanted to create an illustration that shared that, hey, maybe because we talk about loading the spring, but share with them why what you experience and what you perceive might not always be right.
Yeah, a lot of people don't like the Great Depression slide because most of us weren't alive at that time. So let's look at something a little more real, a little more relatable. We know that since 2001, the S&P 500 has had 4 negative down calendar years: 2001, 2002, 2008, and 2018. Well, let's say that you're an investor and I want to invest $1,000 per month through each one of these years. So I'm going to invest $1,000 each month in 2001, $1,000 each month in 2002, in 2008, and then in 2018.
And you're going to stop
And
after
you're going to
that
stop.
1,000.
You're just going to invest $12,000. So at the end of the year, here's what your $12,000 looked like. For the person investing in 2001, I put $12,000 to work and I've only got $11,500. For the person in 2002, I put $12,000 to work. I've only got $10,500. In 2008, I put $12,000 to work. I've only got $8,700 at the end of the year. And for the person in 2018, I put $12,000 to work. I've only got $10,900 at the end of the year.
Now, Bo, I feel like you have created a Wile E. Coyote Roadrunner trap here, because when I'm looking at this, I can practically see you spreading the pine straw over the trap that you're going to spring on us. I look at this and I'm like, man, 2008, you would probably be pretty sick.
I think investing doesn't work.
You invested $12,000. It's worth $8,700 at the end of the year. You're like, never again. This is a sucker's trap if I've ever seen it. But I've heard you, and I want to give you a chance to talk about it. The loading of the spring,
That's
meaning that, or the rubber band effect, you could call it either or. The worse something is, the better the potential could be. Can you elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah, that's right. We know that when we have a rubber band and we pull it down, the further we pull it down, the more violent and aggressively it will pop back up. Well, markets work the same way. So we said if we look at each of these 4 down years, what if we were to fast forward? What if we were to go 10 years in the future from each of these years? How did it turn out? Well, you can see that in 2001, that $12,000 investment 10 years in the future had turned into $15,000. In 2002, that $12,000 had turned into $18,000. In 2008, the one that was the scariest, the one where you thought investing does not work anymore, the worst year of these 4, that $12,000 investment 10 years in the future would be worth over $31,000. And now we haven't had 10 years pass since 2018, but if you just looked at that $12,000 that you invested in 2018 as of today, as of 2022, it's worth almost $22,000. I'm sorry, as of the end of 2021, it's worth almost $22,000.
So it hasn't even had the 10 years, obviously, because 2018, we're in 2022. But it's still really amazing. And it plays into that rubber band effect nicely, and the fact that what can be perceived as the worst experience. Because realize, we looked at this 12 months in the future. You stayed diligent the whole 12 months putting your $1,000 in. And then, but the one that had the worst result that you probably, if you stopped after that year, because you're like, man, this thing, I know my rich uncle down the street or my mother-in-law told me to do this, but man, this just feels like a fool's errand. You could see if you just stayed consistent, stayed the course, had more of a long-term mindset. Remember those 4 rules we shared at the beginning of today's show? You got rewarded for your consistency and being diligent and also being disciplined. It's truly incredible.
All right, so maybe you're already doing this. Maybe you're already hyper accumulating and you're moving on. Well, then you get to step 8 of the financial order of operations. This is prepaid future expenses. Assuming that you've done all the other things that you're supposed to have been doing, you're doing all of the financial mutant characteristics, there's nothing wrong with funding future goals, like saving for college for kids, or saving for the vacation home, or saving for the vacation, or fill in the blank on the next thing for a future expense that you think you might incur.
By the way, I feel like if we were rebranding, because we've worked through rebranding and all these other things, prepaid future expenses, that sounds like I ought to put my glasses on. Prepaid future expenses. Reality is we ought to call this razzle-dazzle time.
Oh, okay.
Because guess what you get to do at step 8? You get to, this is when, if you remember, we're the people who've been putting limits on you saying, hey, make sure you're doing 23.8 on that car, and that's what leads you to end up with the Honda Civic. But maybe step 8 is when you're like, Tesla, here we come. Or maybe when you're doing that transcontinental flight to go visit Europe and Paris or whatever, you're flying business class now, baby, because we have kicked it up a notch. We've already paid through all the steps of making sure the financial foundation was built. This is razzle-dazzle time to actually daydream about what we want to do. For all of you that want to know, when do I get into residential real estate or commercial real estate? Razzle-dazzle time's a great time to kind of step in that, because you've already got your financial foundation underneath you, so that guess what? If things don't go like you anticipate, you've got enough underneath you, the pocket's deep enough to make it through that.
And then step number 9, the last step in the financial order of operations, is prepaying low interest debt. This is often your mortgage on the primary residence. If you've done everything else, there's nothing wrong if one of your goals is to be debt free to think about doing that. However, word of caution, and Brian, you can obviously speak to this, if you're someone who's been prepaying the debt because you've been doing all the other orders of the financial order of operation, but you're recognizing there's a huge opportunity to the market now. It's down 25%. This might be a time that you may want to revisit that strategy, at least for the moment.
Well, I always think paying down that low interest debt, because I know a lot of you, we've come through a period. Now, look, mortgages right now getting close to 7%, but it wasn't just a short period ago. People had 2.5%, 3% mortgages. You're looking at those mortgages now, and a lot of you, though, still have this desire. Let's get debt-free completely, and I love it. Going into financial independence, debt-free is admirable. It's actually good because it's more about keeping wealth than just making wealth. And I've told you guys, I have a kind of a line in the sand. If you're under 45, we're worried about, are you going to be wealthy? You're on that wealth-building journey. Post 45, I want you to kind of be on that we flipped the script and we've gotten to the point where we got to be limiting risk and maybe working on being debt-free by retirement. But I got to tell you, as a person quickly approaching 50, I had this goal that I want to be completely debt-free with my mortgage. I've shared with you guys, I think I'm up to 86, 87% equity in my house, very limited mortgage. So I'm at the point I ought to just pay this thing off. But then when rates are, like I said, I've got a 2.5% mortgage. I see what's going on with the markets right now. I actually flipped the script, even though I'm post 45, and said the deal is too good. It's part of that whole Warren Buffett, be greedy when others are fearful and fearful when others are greedy. I'm seeing a lot of people that are scared right now. So I'm kind of getting greedy on the other side, in the fact that, yes, I will knock out that other 14% that I have that's mortgage on my house if you compare it to market value. But right now, while rates are, the market's down in the dungeon, let's go buy low and make some money, and then I'll have the opportunity still to be debt-free by the time I'm 50 by taking a portion of that money that I was kind of opportunistic with and just stroking a check. That's kind of where the goal has shifted. Look, I know you love to say this is an I told you so moment, because I'm always the one saying I want a simpler life. I'm going to pay down that debt sooner because I'm trying to be debt-free. But there is a chance still that here, if you take that contrarian's mentality, I'll still be able to write that check when I'm 50 years old, but I'm just going to be doing it with a lot more capital appreciation versus the principal that went into paying down that debt.
All right, so we've talked about where to put the money. Maybe that was your question. The market is crashing, things are falling all around me. Where do I put my money? Or maybe your question was, what should I put my money in? I hear you guys saying the stock market's on sale. I hear you guys saying that there are opportunities. I'm talking about investing. When it comes to investing, how should I do it? How do I approach it? Where do I go? In our view, there's really 3 different ways you can think about putting your money to work.
Well, I think I want you to try to keep your life simple, especially in the beginning. When you're in that accumulation stage, we're building wealth. You got to focus on how much can I save? And that's what I think a lot of us get all bogged down. We've given you the financial order of operations, but now what do you put your money in? The big thing is we like index target retirement funds, because you only have to answer 2 questions. How much can I save? When do I need it? They do all the work outside of that.
Yeah, and so we think that if this is one of the ways you want to go about saving, there's a lot of really great providers out there. 3 of the biggest are Fidelity, Schwab, and Vanguard. And if you go look, these are targeted retirement index funds with super low internal expense ratios. The Fidelity fund has an expense ratio of 0.12, and then Schwab and Vanguard are both down around 0.08. You decide when you think you'll need the money, and then these funds will naturally become more conservative over time. So all you have to do is focus on your savings rate, set it and forget it, and this will do the rest for you. So that's one of the ways. You can use a target retirement index fund. The next way you could go about deciding what to put your money in is you could do a build your own approach. You could go about thinking, okay, I will build and construct my own portfolio. And there's nothing wrong with that, but there probably are some pitfalls to watch out for.
Well, I think, first of all, I love the fact, because this slide that's up on the screen right now on why we like index target retirement funds, and you got the internal expenses. There's so many trolls that climb out of the bridges and say target retirement funds are expensive. This throws shade on that. But here's another thing. But where you're alluding to is if you do it yourself or you hire a manager versus just go the easy way and buy into a growing economy by just buying the index, which is the market. Here's something that I think people need to be aware of. If you look at the 10-year return of performance of active managers versus the passive, which is index investing, you'll find out, and you'll be shocked by it. Spiva posts this data every year. And by the way, don't think this is a one-off. I mean, we've been talking about this content for now over a decade because it's just that consistent. 86.1% over 10-year performance, domestic equity funds underperform, the active domestic equity funds underperform just the basic index.
So if you are going to build your own, you're going to try to construct your own portfolio, perhaps thinking about a passive approach. Now, if you're going to do that, obviously index funds are something that you should be aware of, but you also need to know a few other things. You need to be able to accurately define your risk tolerance, how much risk can you handle, along with your risk capacity. How much risk should you handle? Where are you in your financial life cycle? And then how do you even use tools to spread out risk? Thinking through diversification and spreading out your assets and looking at asset location. There's nothing wrong with doing it yourself and trying to do it yourself, but unfortunately, not a lot of people have that skill set. Not a lot of people have been trained on how to do that well.
I think this is because we've gotten some comments. There was one that came in just this morning. I always think these trolls, they think that they're hurting me, but actually they're making us stronger by giving us good fodder for discussion with you guys. There was a gentleman, I felt bad for him because he was like, look, I'm so tired of this financial mutant stuff. You're so optimistic for these 20 and 30-year-olds. What about us that are at retirement or, I am retired. I've got to pay a mortgage and my portfolio is down 30% right now. And I'm like, whoa, he doesn't even realize it, but he told me a lot about his life. First of all, if we were thinking about structure on how you do this efficiently and understanding risk tolerance versus risk capacity, a retiree should not have a huge mortgage that they're worried about paying for. The second thing is risk capacity and risk tolerance, those two risk components. A person who's fully retired, losing 30% when the market's down 20 to 25%, what are you doing? I mean, to lose greater than the market, you didn't get the asset allocation. You didn't get the component that maybe you don't have the risk capacity to have the time to recover. So you better get the asset allocation right so that those two risk components work well together. And this is, Bo, you make a great point when we share all these things on the paths you can go. You said there's 3 different ways, and we talked about you can do the index target retirement. You can do it yourself by just straight up index investing. But there's a third path, and that's what breaks my heart, is this person said that he got a hold of a bad financial advisor, and it was that advisor that put him in that portfolio that lost that, because I saw the comments you guys were posting. That's wrong. And that's what I'm telling you. We work with clients. We help them land the airplane. We just did a studio tour right before we hit record. Yep. And that's exactly what this person's shared. They love that we do all the risk profiling. We stress test the retirement plan. We also work on the asset allocation. We understand risk tolerance versus risk capacity. We work with clients to try to help them navigate this well. And I think that that's not something you can just take for granted. You can't just set it, forget it. We've actually, even if you go to moneyguy.com/resources, we have the 8 questions you should ask your financial advisor. That is going to keep you from having that woeful tale of somebody not doing the best work for you to help you navigate this well.
Here's the thing. The market is frightening right now. It is scary. It is uncomfortable, but it should not be something that derails your long-term plan. If you make sure you're following the financial order of operations and you know what your plan was coming into this market, what your plan is while you're in this market, and what your plan should be coming out of this market, and that plan is consistent, there's a good chance that you're setting yourself up for long-term success. And if you don't have a beat on that, or if you don't have confidence on that, or you don't feel secure in that, we would love to be able to help you. You can go check out the website, moneyguy.com or aboundwealth.com. Click on Work With Us. We would love to hear from you and see how we might be able to be a part of your financial journey.
Well, and this is the Abundance Cycle full going through the process, and the fact that I want all my young people or people who are just beginning on this journey. You don't even have to be young. I want you to learn from what we're sharing with you, apply these concepts. I want you to grow to a level of success. Use everything we just shared. You can be as simplistic or do it yourself as you want to. Success is going to create complication. That's where taking it to the next level. We will be there waiting for you. The Work With Us page on moneyguy.com, Abound Wealth, just like Bo said, we'll be there to help you navigate all these hard decisions. And look, if you're in that do-it-yourself process, we get it. You're part of that learn, apply part. Go ahead and accelerate. Go to moneyguy.com/resources. Get the free stuff. Download the 9 steps of the financial order of operations. But if you wanted a curated experience, if you want to kind of put it in the fast lane, you want to accelerate the process, make sure you're going to learn.moneyguy.com because we have great tools. Net worth tool to not only help you do a net worth statement, but also have a dashboard to know what you need to be watching so you can track to figure out how you accelerate this process of creating wealth. You also got a brand new course called Know Your Number. If you're one of those younger people in your 20s, 30s, and even 40s, and you don't want to, you want something beyond just a napkin plan of what you can do, I want you to go look at Know Your Number because you at least know where you're navigating to and be able to play around with the variables. And then, of course, foundationally, the last course that I want to talk about, Financial Order of Operations, we actually laid it out in a much deeper dive to help you navigate. And by the way, it's the second release of the Financial Order of Operations. We released it once. We had a few questions coming in, people trying to stress test things or know where there were faults. We answered all those questions and laid it right into that content. Go to learn.moneyguy.com. We're looking for ways for you to accelerate your journey to success so you can be the best version of yourself. I'm your host, Brian Preston. Mr. Bo Hansen, Money Guy team, out.